This is Barn Game, a game about barn. Amazing name, I know. I made this game in 72 hours for Ludum Dare 52. If you're unfamiliar with Ludum Dare, it's a game-making competition over the span of a weekend based on a given theme. Game jams like these are great opportunities to connect with the game dev community and put your skills to the test. This was my first ever game jam and the theme was Harvest. Immediately I was thinking that the theme was pretty narrow. The only connections I could think of were farming or some other type of resource collecting, and I didn't want to make some boring game that's bogged down with a bunch of half-baked mechanics. All of my favorite games are fast-paced, action-packed, and most of all difficult, so I wanted to make something that I would enjoy. After brainstorming for not too long, I came up with the idea of playing as a scarecrow, who's tasked with defending a barn from the evil crops that tried to destroy it. The concept has to do with harvesting, but I could still make the simple but difficult combat that I love. After coming up with the idea, I spent most of the first day making art. Normally I think it's best to get a working prototype of the game first, to test to see if it's actually fun. Then you don't risk spending a bunch of time on visuals you might end up abandoning. But I was pretty confident in my game idea, and I thought it would be much easier and more enjoyable to make the game with completed assets, and not just circles and squares moving around. I didn't have any experience making art from scratch, so I drew a lot of inspiration from browsing Google. I found images I liked and traced over the main shapes in GIMP. Then, I could add my own detail and color to make the assets my own. I didn't have the time to draw animations, so I just applied some clever effects to the images. I applied a hand-drawn shader that I got from the all-in-one sprite shader pack to make the sprites look more dynamic, and I also added squash and stretch animation to make the sprites bob up and down. This made all of the objects look alive even though they're just still images. On the second day, I developed the core mechanics of the game. I made the player able to swing the scythe in the mouse direction to attack, and I added the two enemies, the potato and corn. The potato dashes through the nearest enemy, and the corn shoots pieces of corn out in all directions. If you've played my first game, Cheese Game, these moves might seem pretty familiar. They were pretty easy to implement since they were basically ripped straight from the first boss of the game, the miner. After making the enemies, I decided it would be more interesting to have the barn run around. Having the object you're trying to defend moving makes the game way more interesting and skillful. I redrew the barn with eyes and made it move in random directions and run away when enemies get close. I also added that the player can hit the barn to maneuver it around enemies and projectiles and into better positions. This small detail was a great decision and added a ton of depth to the game. Now the game was not only about killing enemies, but also managing the barn's position and making sure it doesn't run into enemies or go into a bad spot. To end off day 2, I quickly created the game loop and got 2 of my friends to play it. The main complaint I got was that the game was too hard, and even though I did make it easier for the final version, I think I could have done more. The scarecrow has barely any health, and the enemies start spawning really fast, so it was hard for the player to keep up. When making a game, it's really easy to underestimate the difficulty because the people playing your game for the first time don't know the game as well as you do. Or maybe I'm just insane at video games. But if I were to make an updated version, I would make it easier by giving the player more health and limiting how many enemies could be spawned at once. I spent the last day of the game jam finishing up and polishing. I wanted it to feel like a finished game. To make the play area look less flat and more like a farm, I added wheat that spawned randomly around the map. They have their own squash and stretch animation, and it made a huge difference for the visuals. I also added music and sound effects that I got from the Ultimate Sound Effects bundle on the Unity Asset Store. And, to finish up, I added some enemy death particles and a quick main menu. All in all, participating in Ludum Dare 52 was a great experience. It was a super smooth process with no major roadblocks. I came up with an idea and developed it to completion. Barn Game didn't get the greatest score, but I'm really proud of what I managed to get done in 3 days, and I've gotten a ton of super positive reviews. If you want to try out Barn Game right now for free, then the link is in the description below. It's a super small download, and I'd love any sort of critique on my first game jam. Thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and leave a comment down below if you have any video or game development requests. If I see any cool game ideas, I'll try to make them for a future video.